for the VOC, the Verenigde Oos-Indische Compagnie. They were part of the Dutch Golden Age exploration to the east, but that's basically a whole other tour. So Cape belonged to the Dutch. About 1795, the British didn't like that the Dutch had the Cape due to political reasons, so they took over for the first time. Then in I think it's 1803, they took over for the second time, and then they kept in power. So the Afrikaner people who sort of were the descendants of the Dutch started their own little enclave, I cannot speak today. Good luck to you. They started their own little enclave, Afrikaner people, and eventually by 1834, they were fed up with the British in the Cape Colony. Reasons were that they felt they didn't have any protection from the government in the Cape, as most of these Afrikaner people were living on the eastern frontier, and they had many battles with the Xhosas called the Frontier Wars, lasted about 100 years. So they felt that they didn't get any support from the government in these wars. And then there was also the abolishment of slavery that upset them a little, because they felt they invested so much in the slaves and now they're not really getting bang for their buck. So they decided to trek. So they loaded all of their wagons, got their children and their cattle, and they trekked through the interior, or to the interior of South Africa. Now, once again, the Great Trek is also a whole other tour, but there were lots of trials and tribulations, because it was not an easy trek. Like, for instance, if you had to go over mountains, which there were many of, you actually had to pack everything off the wagon, disassemble the wagon, carry it over the mountains, assemble, put everything back, and then you could go. But for me, for instance, I would have just gone back to the Cape. Guys, this is exactly. So they were brave. So by 1838, farmers started to settle in this area, mainly because the weather is quite good. It's warm in summer, but the winters aren't that bad. And there were water in what is now called Fountains Valley, about 5 kilometers that way, more or less. My distances aren't that great. And now I wanted to tell you that the fountain at Fountains Valley still provides 16 Olympic swimming pools full of water for the inner city. But now you're going to tell me, Annette, there's no water here today. So I'm not sure what happened to the water, but the fountain is still fountaining. And they actually built a nice little house over it to keep it clean. So if you have a community of farmers, you basically, well, let's say it like this. They were a very religious community. So at some point, they decided that they need a church. So a guy called Martinus Pretorius, who was a leader in the community, donated part of his farm called Kuduspoort to what they called a kerkplaas, or a church farm, an area which they could build a church on, which is now Church Square. It's basically the center of Pretoria. So once a quarter, everybody from the farms would come. It'd be like a community gathering. Hello and welcome.
I'm sorry. We were on the other side. Yes.
Oh, did you not get the email?
We got, but Uber.
Oh, Uber.
Yes, Uber. It was a bit hard to find Uber this morning.
But congratulations. You are with us now. Farming community, they wanted a church, so once a quarter, everybody would come to communion, but they would come on like the Wednesday and so until the Monday. So it was a very big gathering. And if you were in the market for a wife, That's also where you found your wife, or a eh? Exactly. Um, so now there's a community in the area, and then you start needing a shop, and you need a this or that, like German. So eventually, 1853, so that's 15-ish years after the first settlers came, they decided, okay, well, we need a proper proclaimed town now. So Martinus Pretorius, being the hero of the story, donated another part of his farm. So they actually started to build a town. They built the town, they called it Pretoria. It was after Andries Pretorius, who was a hero of the Battle of Blood River. That was 16 December 1838, when the Afrikaner people won quite a decisive battle against Zulus in what is now KwaZulu-Natal. So they decided to name it after this hero. At first, it was called Pretoria Stad, but yeah, they didn't like it that much. Then they decided on Pretoria, Philadelphia, which they liked, Philadelphia meaning brotherhood. But then Philadelphia sort of fell by the wayside, and they eventually settled on Pretoria. Right, questions? Right, I must be a good teacher. Right, we are going to walk to the front of the house to talk about the hazes. Remember not to fall on the pathway. Also, you'll see the tennis court was a proper Victorian grass tennis court. It fell into a bit of disrepair, but they are busy rehabilitating it. So you'll see some growth. So it's a work in progress. So I'm not sure if maybe in a year's time I'm going to invite you to Pretoria's Wimbledon at Melrose House. Right, let's go. Ja. Ek beloof. Moet jy nou net nie val nie. Nou moet ons oor begin en ek sien nie kans nie. Ek het. Ja, neem foto's.
Is that a fig?
It's a wild fig. Yeah. Right, so people always ask me about that huge tree. I'm not a botanist, but it is a wild fig. And 4 years ago, they told me it's 136 years old, so I suppose it's 140 years old now. You may stand closer. Or if I'm scary, you can stand further away. Right. Melrose House, I think pretty much with Sammy Mark's house, which is quite a distance from here, is pretty much Pretoria's grandest old mansion. It looks out of place today, but on either side back in 1886 were similar houses. So it's just the high rises that makes it feel a little cramped today. So it was built in 1886. So you might wonder what someone in Pretoria did to make all of this money. The guy's name was George Jesse Hayes. He was Pretoria's shortest businessman at 5'2". And he made his money with stagecoaches. Because in the early days of Pretoria, there were actually no railway. The closest railway was Kimberley, which is quite far away, or a place called Bickertsburg in KwaZulu-Natal, which is close to present-day Dundee, which is also a good bit away. So George Hayes came to to Pretoria in 1879. With his family, his wife Janie, and his then two daughters, Pearl and Jessie. They settled not too far away in a house, a normal house, in Andries Street. He started his life in Pretoria he had a general trading store, but then he saw a gap in the market. So together with a guy called Edmund Burke, they started the George Hayes and Company Stagecoach Company. Apparently, Edmund Burke was his 50-50 business partner, but I always find it strange that poor Burke isn't mentioned in the name. So maybe he was a silent partner. So what set George Hayes's company apart from the other companies is that he was a speed coach line. So he imported coaches from America, which could get you to Kimberley in 7 days and not 8 days, which was a massive improvement. Get you to Bickertsburg in 2 days. It sounds very, very weird by today's standards to take 7 days to get to Kimberley, but I think they weren't as much in a hurry as we are. So yeah, he made a lot of money. He also had a couple of government contracts. As go, we have a couple of contracts. So by 1885, he decided that he needed to upgrade his residence a little bit. If you're rich, you have to live in a house that shows exactly how rich you are and how far above you are in society. So he bought 2 plots of land right opposite Burgess Park, which was at that point a botanical garden, so it was quite nice. So if you were a Victorian lady, you could just come out of the house and go relax in the park. So he got an architect called W.T. Kate, and the brief to the architect was, we want something Victorian, but it must also be African. So the house has many, many Victorian features, but the biggest South African feature it has is the wraparound veranda to keep it cool in summer. And it also has very high ceilings to help with keeping it cool. But the gables are also a little bit of a Dutch influence. And the people who are really, really into architecture, who's not me, say it's Victorian, yes, but it's also a little bit Edwardian with the South African influences. So it's a little bit democrat. But it's nice, it's different. So before we go into the house, Does anybody have any questions? No questions?
Not yet.
Not yet. I must be such a great teacher if you don't have questions.
Yes, give it a 10 out of 10, please.
Right, we can go in the back like we're servants. Dit vroeg weer om alleen afgeneem te word. Yes.
Why does this house still stand, whereas the others, the neighboring houses, obviously disappeared?
We'll get there, but it's because at the end of the Anglo-Boer War, Second Anglo-Boer War, they signed the peace treaty in the dining room.
Yeah.
So it has more historical significance than whatever was around.
Yes, they do.
I forgot to mention two things. To keep a grand mansion like this going, they had 14 white servants, one housekeeper, who was apparently very, very strict, and 30 African servants, which is like a staff of 45 to keep it going. We're going to go inside. You are more than welcome to take pictures. Just no flash photography, please, because apparently it damages old stuff. Okay, so we're going to walk right past everything to the front door. So pretend you don't see anything. We'll get back to it.
I lived in Nagoya for a couple of years. That's not anywhere near where you're from. It's not bad. English teacher. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, I will talk about each room, and when I'm done talking, I'll give you time to peek or take a look through the glass door. I did ask if we can maybe open the glass door, go inside, have a look, and they just laughed at me. All right, so as you can see, or as you felt when we come in, it's a very, very cool house because of all of the features. In winter, I don't like doing tours in here because it's a very, very cold house. But back in the day, they had the fireplaces going, which probably made a difference. So this house was occupied by the Hayes family from 1887 until 1969, although George Hayes passed away in 1939. His wife passed away about 7 years earlier. and his daughters, his 3 daughters over there, Pearl, Mabel, and Jessie, were living in the UK as they got married. But the house was occupied by family members until 1969, when the Pretoria Town Council bought the house from the estate and turned it into a museum. So as you can see, we've got mosaic floors. That is actually because it's easier to clean than carpet in 1886. And it's also a part of an effort to keep the house cool. I think Mrs. Hayes was a very hot person because everything in this house is in keeping it cool. Teak doors, and throughout the house you have stained glass windows, but each different room has a different theme. So yeah, by the front door we would have composers, like that's Handel's and that's Rubens, or artists. In the billiard room it is famous writers. So what this shows us is that these people had money and they weren't afraid to spend it. So our first room to the left here is the morning room. So if you were a Victorian lady, if you were a married Victorian lady, you would get your breakfast in bed upstairs every morning. But if you were the husband who had to go to work to provide all of this, or the children, you had breakfast in the morning room. So the morning room was very sunny, and it was also a very informal space. It's also where you could plan your day. Later in the morning, you would do a little bit of embroidery. I mean, if you're the lady of the house and you came downstairs, you did your embroidery and whatever you did to pass the time, maybe see your children for an hour or so. And then later in the day, they would move to the drawing room after a nap, because you cannot proceed with your afternoon if you did not have a nap. What makes the morning room historically significant is that during the Anglo-Boer War, when Pretoria was besieged in June of 1900, this house was requisitioned, that's a hard word, by the British Imperial Forces to serve as their military headquarters. So depending on what source you read, they would say that the British just took occupation of the house and threw George Hayes out. If you read other sources, it would say, no, George kindly donated the use of the house to the British. That is pretty much because George Hayes had his toast buttered on both sides. So he was friendly with the Boers, with Bill Kruger and his wife and the government, as well as with the British, because he was a businessman and that is the way he could make the most money. So in the early days, just a side note, the Hayeses would not have any portraits in their house unless it was family members, because they didn't want to offend anybody. So if the English people came, or if the Afrikaner people came, everybody had to feel welcome, so they did landscapes. Anyway, back to the morning room and the British. So Lord Roberts moved into the house, and then when Lord Roberts moved back to Britain, Lord Kitchener moved into the house, and they actually used the morning room as their offices. And then that room to your left, which is now just a display room, was at some point the main bedroom, but Lord Kitchener and Roberts used it as the map room to map the wall. So there's no carpet in here anymore. That is because obviously they had a lot of soldiers come in, and soldiers, when leaving the commander's office, had to do an about turn on their heel, and their heels actually made holes in the carpet. So that is why they removed the carpet, and then they went with the wooden look. So that is why the morning room is of specific significance. It's also said that about 13.5 million telegrams, wartime telegrams, were sent from this house. I don't know who counted, but it seems like a nice number. Before you take a look at the morning room, I'm just going to talk about the drawing room, and then you could take a look at both before we move on to the study and the dining room. By the way, we are about halfway through, if you were wondering. Right, drawing room was pretty much the ladies' room. It is also short for withdrawing room. So after dinner in the main dining room, the ladies would withdraw from the men and they would go to the drawing room to have their little sherry and discuss society, while the very important men went to the billiard room to, I don't know, discuss business deal or politics of the day, or maybe get drunk. I think the last one. So the piano was bought by George Hayes for his daughters. And if you read history of society in Pretoria, it always talks about the Hayes and how people would enjoy the daughters' piano playing and singing and everything, and being jolly in general. So the drawing room was also bombed on 31 May 1993 by an Afrikaner right-wing extremist. So it was in the period in South African history when bombings weren't strange. He was caught, but he never could say why he chose to bomb a drawing room of a museum. To me, it just feels like we're bombing something to bomb something. But all of the damage was repaired, and when they repaired the damage, they also redid the wallpaper like it would have looked in 1894. Okay, I'm going to stand that way, then you could look, take your pictures, ask your questions, sing a song with the piano.
What was Hayes' descendants? English. Was he from England?
He was actually born in Durban. He was South African. I think probably from England at some point, yeah. But not, he wasn't.
So you spelled their surname
H-E-Y-S.
Okay. Nice. Wasn't there a what do you call it, the moderator of NGK, Hayes?
He was Haynes.
Oh, Haynes.
With an N.
And I'm sorry, what year was the war when this was the military headquarters?
The war started in 1899 and the peace treaty was signed in 1902. Okay. It was 3 years war, basically.
Okay, thank you.
The house seems to breathe the sort of same atmosphere as Paul Kruger's house. I mean, I visited that a few years ago. Are they from the same period or?
I think Paul Kruger's house was a bit earlier. If I'm not mistaken, it's 1881 or 1880, but 5 years apart. So it's, okay, well. But this one is grander.
Definitely. But then Kruger was supposed to be a modest man, right?
He just had a lot of farms.
Yes. And ambitions for his Republic.
Yes, you Charles. Hi.
Yeah. I ran a few minutes late.
That's okay, you found us.
Yeah.
So the exhibits in this room that used to be the main bedroom and then another sitting room, basically just shows you what life would have been like for the Hayes back in 1886, 1887. So you're more than welcome to take a peek and ask any questions you might have.
Enige idee wanneer dit metode elektrisiteit gekry?
Dit was voor die oorlog.
Vir die boere.
Dit ja, dit weet ek, maar ek ken nie die datum nie. Want in die oorlog was hy al straatligte. Het is 'n bietjie donker hier binne. En jy kan nie flash nie, so. Ja, net die beste. All right, if you are done looking, we can gather at the study and then the dining room.
Just the armory, the adventures.
The armory.
Yes, on that.
Have I not seen that before? Oh, it was the Hayes family crest.
Family crest.
Yeah. They did.
These are not the same.
I'm not sure about that one. I shall find out for you.
So of the furniture that's here, how much of it was being used when the family finally moved out, and how much of it was brought back in to cover like a period piece?
So they restored it after the family moved out in 1969 to what it would have looked like in 1894. So they tried to source as much family heirlooms as they could, but then they just filled in the rest with period furniture that they got elsewhere. But I'm not exact sure on this was family and this was not, for instance. All right. So we're taking a look at the study. Yeah. So any good Victorian gentleman had to have his work from home study. Although his offices was actually on Church Square, I suppose he had important things to do at home or just strategize. So what's interesting is after George Hayes's death, they found some papers in the writing desk that showed that he was very much in cahoots with the British government after the war, providing transport services. So they got invoices from transport services, but nobody was exactly sure what or who he transported, but the amount was quite substantial. But I suppose after the railway in 1893, the stagecoach business declined a little. So I suppose you had to do what you had to do to make a buck to keep Mrs. Hayes happy. Right, so that's the study. We can go to the dining room. Right, so the dining room is the reason why this house is a museum. So, like I said, it was requisitioned by the British military forces, and at the end of the war, the actual peace treaty was signed in this room, on this table, by representatives of the British and the Orange Free State, and the ZAR, or the Transvaal Republic. So it was called the Treaty of Vereniging. So common mistake is that it was signed at Vereniging, but it was called the Treaty of Vereniging because representatives from each commando of the Boer forces were gathered in a tented camp in Vereniging. So what would happen was the leaders, the two presidents of the country, would come and discuss peace settlements here at Melrose House with the British, and then they would go back to Vereniging by train, and they would discuss it with their leaders to see if they were happy with the terms and conditions or not, and then they would come back here. From here, they would telegraph London, and London would decide whether it was favorable for the British or not, and then they would renegotiate, and the process would start again. So it was a bit of a mission. But then essentially the Orange Free State and the Transvaal realized that they cannot continue with this war anymore. It's just not viable. So they accepted not so favorable terms from the British. And when they went back to Vereniging to have a vote, everybody, 54 out of 60 delegates voted for peace. So the leaders came back to Pretoria. They had the treaty signed here in the dining room table on 31 May 1902. And the story goes that Lord Kitchener said after they signed it, he took a look at the Boers and he just said, "Oh, we're all good friends now." And obviously the Afrikaner people didn't feel the same. So while I'm standing here and looking at that piece of wallpaper, the wallpaper obviously is in good condition, so it was redone about 10 years ago, but it was redone to look like that patch of wallpaper that they're pretty sure is the original because they uncovered it from quite a number of layers of wallpaper. So you can take a look at the dining room. Maybe he just liked armor. You're allowed to go up. There are ghosts, but you can go. Nee, ons gaan op. If you are done taking a peek at the dining room, you can descend the stairs. Ascend, don't descend, ascend. And hold the handrail, don't fall. Sorry? No, the ceiling is not original. They actually replaced it earlier in the year because they had a lot of water damage.
This ceiling? Yeah, I was just wondering because it's not like the Victorian ceilings. Yeah. It looks, from the outside in any case, like the maintenance is not quite what it could be. With a lot of the wood seams.
If you saw it this time last year, you'd have said today that the maintenance is
Oh, really?
shop.
So it's been up. So there was a good patch of doing something.
Yes, the museum was closed January, February, and March, so they redid the whole roof because that when it heavy rain, they had lots of problems with water damage and seepage. But I do agree with you; they could spruce up the wooden.
Yeah. The wood needs maintenance.
But funds is a constant problem.
Who's responsible for that? The city or?
Yeah, and there's the problem. Right, we can go up.
The fact it should not be with the city.
But then who else?
I don't know. It's not my area. Or they're not sort of museums or something.
There are Ditsong museums, which is a private company, but they would then have to buy the building from the city. And the city doesn't want to let it go. We don't know why, because it's not exactly a cash cow. So I wanted to say not much action in the upstairs part of the house, but then I just realized, they had 3 babies, so there must have been action in this part of the house. But the most notable feature upstairs here is the sauna in the bathroom. So you would hop into that wooden box, they would heat it up, and your head would stick out, and you would be saunatized. In summer in Pretoria, I don't know why you would need a sauna, so maybe it was just used in winter. And then you just have the main bedroom, typical Victorian style, dressing room with a sunroom. In winter, that sunroom looks so inviting, it's unreal, but you can't get there. And then just the daughter's bedroom. And you could just take a look as you walk through. The second bathroom actually has a shower. So it was one of the first showers in Pretoria. Which actually mean they must have had electricity, because they must have had a water pump to get sufficient pressure.
Is that one of the girls?
Yes. No, that's a boy. It's the grandson, the heir to his grandfather's fortune. It's actually the only grandson. His first name was Alan. I'm not sure about the surname. But he lived in Scotland, that I'm sure of, because he was Mabel's son and she married a Scottish guy, so they lived in the UK. Actually, all 3 of his daughters moved. That's okay, they had a lot of money, they could just hop on a ship.
Ek sal hom skree as hulle my in daai boek sit.
If you are brave, you could go up the steps to the attic. I'm not that brave, because there are ghosts, I'm telling you. But it is basically just made up to be storerooms now. Look at all these brave people. Dis waar.
baie goedjies lyk soos ons oupas en oumas se goeders. So, selfs die houertjies. Oumas se is gehad. En hierdie naaldruk skoonpaad so enig. Ag,
Die naalgoeder. Ek weet nie eens wat mens met al daai goeders doen nie.
ja.
Maar nou is dit het nog mooi goedjies gemaak. Nou is alles net so funksioneel.
Sê dit lyk soos jou pa se goeders.
Ja. Ja.
Ja.
Wat is daai ronde ding met die skewe deksel en die aantrekkamer?
Die ronde ding met die skewe deksel. Laat ek kyk.
Daai ding.
Is dit nie 'n naaldwerk katoetertjie?
Ek het net die goed binne gesien, dit lyk vir my so stompe vir vuur maak, maar nou besef ek nie. Ek dink jy's reg, dis naaldwerk.
Want ek dink
ja.
sy het daar in die son gesit en haar goetertjies gedoen.
Nee, dit is sekerlik ja. Ja, die binnekant het my mislei. Ek dink dis vuur maak. En die houding
Dis wat ek kan sê.
Yes. All children in here are the grandson. Right, so how was the attic? Did you find any ghosts?
Maybe ja, in die suitcase. Ja, dis air-conditioning. Ja,
Okay, you can. See, that's why there are ghosts, because I leave people and then they. Were you the last person? More, okay. Don't want to leave anyone behind.
was nog 3 of so daarop.
Thank you for the head count.
Do you know what those doing? Is it open here? Or?
Yeah, during the week from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Okay.
And the parking is also open.
Yeah.
But if you want to come, they only take cash.
Okay.
And it's 30 Rand for adults. Thank you. Were you the last person?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So the billiards room was apparently one of the grandest in Pretoria. It's a billiard table they imported from Scotland.
Slate.
I'm not sure what the difference between a Scottish billiard table and a South African billiard table is. Probably the price.
Maybe the wood.
I think the slate is really important because you need it to be entirely smooth.
Waar skildery met daai baie handtekeninge wat weet jy.
Dit is die afdruk van die Peace Treaty met almal se handtekeninge. If you want, you could actually rent this room for tea parties. It's very nice in winter. In December, it's not so great.
These rooms on the side, were they
Servants' quarters for the 45.
And the governess was in the top.
Yeah, shame, in the heat.
Yeah.
You teach the children and then you get the attic. Right. Oh, there's still people inside. It was used to sharpen knives. So a very strong person would turn and then you would just sharpen your knives.
And you done only for the bar or why they had it here?
I was only for the kitchen, for themselves. I think you needed 45 people to actually turn this thing. All right. If my maths is correct, we are everybody. So this concludes the Melrose House part of the tour. Took a little bit longer than expected because you asked questions, which is a good thing. So yeah, I've hoped you gained some insight into a tiny bit of the Anglo-Boer War and the heyday of Pretoria's rich haze. All right, I'm just going to quickly tell the lady that we are done, and then we can go to the gate. Hey.